Alright, chapter 9.3 is all about solving quadratic equations. Today we get back to a little bit of the algebra portion of the work. That's only for actually a day. Then we're going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation using basic steps. There are two essential questions which pretty much represent what we are learning today. First thing is, what does a solution look like? Because there are two ways to solve a quadratic equation. One is by looking at its graph, and the other one is by using some sort of method like what we're going to learn about later. So if you're looking at a graph of a quadratic equation, you identify the solution as the pointer points where the graph crosses the y-axis. For example, if you look at y equals x squared plus 4, usually your solution is where y is 0, which means that it's the spot where anytime y equals 0, you'd look at 4, 0 or 3, 0 or something like that. I don't know how much that helps, but if you look at the three graphs, and they were to ask you what the solutions are of these three graphs, first off you need to understand that this has two solutions. I would write this stuff by your picture here so you understand later when you come back. But this has two solutions because it crosses the x-axis twice. So on your paper I will go ahead and circle both of those so you know both of those are the solutions. These solutions are based off of this x equals negative 1 because it crosses at x equals negative 1, and the solution is also x equals 1 because it crosses at x equals 1. That is your answer. And that's how you find it, okay? We also know, and this has nothing to do with this lesson here, that this has a minimum of y equals negative 1 or whatever it might be. But again, these are things that you're starting to kind of learn by looking at graphs, what's going on with the pictures themselves. Alright? This graph here actually only hits the x-axis once, so this has one solution. And the solution for this is x equals 0. Again, it only crosses at one spot, so therefore the answer is x equals 0. There can't force anything else. And if you look at the third graph, this has, if it does not touch the x-axis, no solutions. And the hard part about chapter 9, doing the work that we do, is that whenever you solve an answer, you have to be prepared for two solutions, one solution, or no solutions. And we'll learn later on how to anticipate that. But again, this is something you need to kind of put into your head, that this is where it gets tough, because your analysis is going to help you to determine whether it's two solutions, one solution, or no solutions whenever you do your work. Alright? Second question is, how do I use algebra to eliminate a square? Well, easiest way to do that is to look at your calculator anytime you're doing something. I actually tutored a student recently on this because she understood what I was telling her when I taught her this a long time ago. Your calculator is set up by programmers who understand opposites. Just like we know in solving that addition is the opposite of subtraction, so if you want to get rid of a positive number, use a negative. If you want to get rid of a multiplication part, use division. If you want to get rid of division, use multiplication. So opposites are pretty close to each other. The reason these are buttons is because these are the four basic operations, but everything else is set up based off of its opposite. So if you look at the x squared key, where the second power is, in green is a square root, which means that if you want to get rid of a square, use a square root. Just like if you want to get rid of a square root, you would use a square, because these two are opposites. There's a lot of opposites that actually are on your, not a lot really, actually I guess there are a few, but opposites are on your calculator. So if you're ever stuck on a test and you can't remember what the opposites are, look at your calculator and look for it. For example, if you don't even know what this is called sine. If you're trying to solve something and sines involved using algebra, guess what the opposite of sine is? It's sine to the negative first power. Opposite of cosine, cosine negative first power, and so on. So again, that's how you find it. But either way, squares are opposites to square roots. So if you want to eliminate a square, you simply square root both sides. It has to be practiced, but again, there's something that's important to understand. This is not your typical algebra, and typically what that power indicates is how many solutions you should have or could have. And so when you do x squared equals 9, we obviously know that 3 times 3 is 9. And so your first instinct when you do the square root of 9 is going to say that the answer is 3. But you need to consider the fact that negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9, which means that the answer is also negative 3. But your calculator is not going to show you the negative part, which is why you have to make sure that you practice this stuff, because if you don't show both answers, then your answer is actually wrong. Alright, so anytime you square root something, you have to understand there are two answers that work, because it's x squared, because the number is being multiplied by itself, there's actually two options that work for it. So again, as long as you do your best with the work that we have on the computer today and the work that we have for the rest of this time here, you should be fine. But again, it is up to you to make sure you practice that. So let's go ahead and look at the questions that are expected of you today as you kind of see where this stuff is going and understand that it's not so bad. It's just, again, making sure you remember how to do both solutions. So if x squared equals 196, there's only one thing we want to do, and again, view this as a number, kind of like when we'd say what's the weakest number there. This is the only number to get rid of, which is a floating 2 or a square. And the way you get rid of a square is by square rooting both sides. And you are actually going to have to type in the square root of x squared equals square root of 196 because I want you to show the work. What happens is the square and the square root cancel out, bringing down just x. And then when you do the square root of 196, again, second x squared, you get 14. So your answer is 14 comma negative 14, because don't forget, 14 and negative 14 are both answers to this. The computer will mark you wrong when you put 14, but that's good for you because you need to be immediately told that you're forgetting something. So again, if you get stuck on that and can't figure out why you're missing it, bring it over. But chances are it's because of that you need to remember there are two ways to answer this. Again, even if you check it, parentheses 14 squared equals, and you see that it's a solution, but if you do parentheses negative 14 squared equals, you see that is also a solution, so that is why both answers work. On B, remember that we always move the weaker number first, which means that when we do this, we have to understand that this is the closest thing to x because it's an exponent, which means the first number we want to get rid of is the 6. Now on the computer, you will not need to show the plus 6, but I would suggest doing it on paper or making sure you're at least at the skill set where you understand that you're going to bring down x squared equals 36. From there, we need to get rid of the 2, so we square root both sides. Again, the square and the square root cancel. And it's not just 6, it is 6 and negative 6 that you need to be looking out for. Alright. C, 4x squared plus 3 equals 403. Again, find the weakest number. X is squared. This is the closest number to it because exponents are the strongest. Here's the thing. Exponents are first, multiplication division second, which means that's the second closest number, which means this should be the first number to go as usual. Again, that's really not going to change from your experience. So you will still move that number that is added or subtracted first because that is the weakest number in the list. You will bring down 4x squared equals 400. Again, you don't need to show that part on the computer, but make sure you have that habit. Second thing you're going to do is you're going to get rid of your weakest number next. Again, exponents are the strongest. They're stronger than multiplication, so multiplication is the weakest, which means we get rid of the 4 first. Now bringing down x squared equals 100. And again, I'll explain on your computer, you do not need to show divided by 4. You will simply bring down x squared and 100. But again, as you bring up your questions, I'll be able to help you out with that. The last thing you're going to do is, because I need you to work on showing this stuff, is put your square root on both sides. And x is equal to 10 and negative 10. Alright. And then the last one, 5 times x squared minus 1 equals 40. The first thing you want to do is distribute it. So this turns into 5x squared minus 5 equals 40, which now looks just like this question. And so once you distribute it and get rid of all your parentheses, you are now equipped to handle this by adding 5 to both sides, dividing by 5, because remember the 5 is weaker than the 2, which you then bring down x squared equals 9, and then in the end square rooting both sides, getting x equals 3, and I almost forgot for myself, negative 3. So again, make sure you make the most of this section. If you finish it up, make sure you go back and start practicing the other stuff. I suggest that you don't just do this homework and leave it as an isolated event, because you need to make sure you have all the information in your head. You need to have stuff from 9.1 in terms of vertex and maximum and minimum, and how to make a 5-point chart from 9.2, and how to find the key x from 9.2 using negative b over 2a. The more you isolate the material, the harder it's going to be for you to put it all back together next week as we get ready for the test. So if you finish this homework, make sure you at least go back to the other stuff, even if you're not working out questions, just to look at them and kind of bring them back to your memory. Other than that, go ahead and go to Math XL and let's get started. Good luck.